Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Metnick. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Affairs at SFI, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a few slides. Myself, Jason Metnick, and Rachel Daroff, who's our manager of SFI Office of Label Use and Licensing. And then we'll have some time for some question and answers afterwards. Everyone on the phone is muted, and that's because we have well over 100 people registered for this webinar, and so we're excited about the participation and the interest in this topic. If you do have questions throughout, go ahead and ask them in the Q&A box, and Rachel and I will get to that at the end of the presentation. And we will go through the slides first and then question and answer afterwards. So this webinar also is being recorded. And if afterwards you want to listen to it or pass it on to other folks within your organization, feel free to send myself or Rachel an email, and we'll make sure that you have the link to do so. We'll also be able to provide the PowerPoint slides of this webinar, and so again, if you want to use any of the slides that we discussed today, feel free to again send Rachel or I an email, and we are happy to pass it on to you after the webinar. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So before I do get started, I want to let you know who at SFI really makes up the Office of Label Use and Licensing, and if you have questions, who to go to. So Gregor McIntosh, who is our Senior Director of Standards, he's the go-to person if you have any technical questions about the forest management, fiber sourcing, or chain of custody standards, and how to implement certain requirements within those standards. Gregor McIntosh is your go-to person. Rachel Daroff, who is our Manager of Label Use and Licensing, handles our label use approvals as well as certifications. And if you have any questions on how to use the label or the label approval website, which she will talk about later on in this presentation, you can contact Rachel Daroff. We also have Rachel Hamilton, who is our Coordinator of Statistics and Label Use. And Rachel is in charge of our annual reporting process, and so if there's any questions specific to our annual reports or the product database or anything else to do with our database, Rachel Hamilton is your go-to person on those questions. And then there's myself, Jason Metnick. I'm Senior VP of Customer Affairs, and if there's any questions you have about any of these topics or specifically related to customers or brand owner outreach or market outreach that SFI is conducting, you can reach out to me directly. And so this is the team that we have that handles the Office of Label Use and Licensing as well as our standards department. So many of you know SFI as the certification standard, and that's you know, the purpose of this webinar is to really go through not just those aspects of SFI, but also the broader scope and the broader mission of who SFI is as an organization. And with that, we do believe forests are the answer to many of our local, national, global challenges. And because of that, we understand all the values that well-managed certified forests provide, whether it's clean water, air, recreational opportunities, wildlife, green jobs, quality products from a renewable resource. That is all of the things that a well-managed certified forest can provide. And so with that, SFI over the last 5 years has really evolved into a much broader sustainability organization, understanding all of these various aspects that forests can help answer for a lot of those challenges that we see. And with that, SFI is broken out into 4 big areas of work because we truly believe that it's these 4 key pillars that make up the larger scope of who the SFI program is about. And so, as I mentioned, many of you probably know SFI for the standards. That's why you're on the phone today to listen to this webinar, is for that work that we do in the certification space. However, we also have 3 other work streams that are equally as important when it comes to conservation leadership, community engagement, and environmental education. And I'll talk about each of those as well throughout the presentation, so you do get that scope of who we are as SFI Inc. and not just the standards part, but all of the various elements within the SFI scope. SFI is governed by an independent board of directors. These are the logos of the organizations that serve on our board of directors. We have a few new board members that were voted on last week at our board meeting, which was in conjunction with our annual conference in Colorado. Of particular note is Dan Lamb, who's the president of the Arbor Day Foundation, is under the Environmental Chamber now. And also it's of particular note that Mark Rogers, who is the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity Canada, serves as the chairman of SFI's board. And I think him serving as the chairman really gives a good understanding of the larger mission of SFI as the sustainability organization, looking within the community pillar as well of the work that we do within the larger scope of SFI Inc. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and Rachel's going to go through these next few slides, and then she's going to pass it back over to me, and I'll wrap up the PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A.
Thanks, Jason. So going back to what Jason said, a lot of folks know SFI for our standard because that's how it all started. It started with the standard. It's been around since about 1995, and the program was launched about 23 years ago, starting to be a while ago. So the 3 standards are at the very heart of our supply chain assurance work. The forest management standard is applicable to organizations who manage forest land, and it's particularly in Canada and the US for where the forests are. The fiber sourcing standard is applicable to organizations with primary mill facilities, and these are also located in Canada and the US. And then the chain of custody standard is applicable to organizations that process or trade products certified to SFI, and chain of custody locations, as long as they're sourcing SFI materials, can be located anywhere in the world. Now, all 3 standards are audited by independent third-party certification bodies, and this is very important to SFI. SFI is involved in the standard development with many stakeholders and interested parties, but the certification bodies are the ones who are granting the certificates after successful audits, and SFI has no influence in the audit process at all. So why get certified? Every year, SFI conducts an annual survey. Rachel Hamilton, as Jason mentioned, does that whole process, and some of you have completed these forms as well about that, so you're very familiar with it. But one of the questions we ask program participants is, why have you chosen SFI certification? And the top 3 that came out of that process was because it meets customer sustainability objectives, because SFI contributes to clean water, and also because it's a proof point for responsible forest management. So at the very beginning of the supply chain are the SFI forests. SFI lands are a representation of landowner diversity across the US and Canada. For example, in the US, 30%, just over 30%, are public state or county lands. There's also university land like Clemson, Indigenous managed land, and by the way, this is a growing area for SFI. There's also forest land from Boy Scouts, the Conservation Fund, Nature Conservancy of Canada, several groups that focus on conservation easements, in addition to several other kinds of organizations in the forest industry. And I'm mentioning this because This broad diversity of users of the SFI Forest Management Standard adds value and reach to the SFI program. And it also brings value to industry and secondary producers further down the supply chain who use fiber sourced from these standards. It also demonstrates that responsible forestry is valued by a broad range of constituents. Just to give you a little idea of what the landscape is like in North America particularly, SFI forests currently exceed over 300 million acres. That's 125 million hectares for the Canadians on the phone. Some of this growth is due to these new Indigenous lands certified to the SFI standard in Canada, as well as the SFI Forest Partners Program. Now, the SFI Forest Partners Program is a very unique approach that has brought in 9.3 million acres of SFI forests and 56 primary mills to date. This unique program has a couple of very specific objectives with it and is led by my colleague Barry Graydon, who, if you have more questions about this, you can find him on the SFI website. And I think he's also participating in the webinar today, should you have questions at the end. So the first objective of this program is to find innovative approaches to group and coordinated certification, seeking opportunities for collaboration, cost, and incentives. The second is to facilitate the uptake of fiber from certified forest lands through the supply chain. And then the third is to grow the certified land base by 15 million acres, 6 million hectares by 2020 in the US and Canada. So it's a very specific objective. In summary, the SFI Forest Partners Program is designed to reduce or even eliminate the hurdles to initial certification to the SFI standards through specific guidance and support. So for a broader scope, while our forest management and other programs really are specific to the US and Canada, the scope of the SFI program is really global. SFI forests represent nearly 1/4 of all certified forests around the world and 40% of PFC certifications worldwide. To give you a little scope, 11% of the world's forests are certified now to a forest management standard, and of those 11%, so that 11% are certified, and that 11% delivers about 29% of the world's global roundwood production. So it's a pretty big chunk that way. SFI also has global reach. Our certificate holders operate around the world. Through the same survey I mentioned earlier, we ask where products are sold, and we now know that over 140 different countries have SFI products shipped in and sold through them. So it's pretty global. We also ask you to rank the different reasons why you use the SFI label. And the top 3 that came out was because you're proud to be affiliated with SFI, because it creates a positive corporate image, and also because it's a proof point for responsible sourcing. On a related note, the Natural Marketing Institute did a survey of 80,000 US consumers last year. One of the most significant results was that some of the nitty-gritty details, most of you know exactly what these are and what they look like, but these, for those of you who don't know or are not involved in this on a day-to-day basis, these are the SFI on-product labels. They serve as a visual cue for customers to source products from responsibly managed forests. The language on the label corresponds directly with the claim applied by the primary mill. For example, if the mill you're sourcing from is certified to the SFI fiber sourcing standard, it will come into your facilities with an SFI certified sourcing claim, and then you use the SFI certified sourcing label. Similarly, if the mill sources SFI certified forest content and also has an SFI chain of custody certificate to support the claim, their customers can then use the SFI chain of custody label. The chain of custody standard ensures that the communication of these claims from the manufacturer to the customers is withheld the entire way. So in addition to the on-product labels that we just looked at, SFI also has some promotional logos. And these logos promote affiliation with SFI and are typically used in communications and marketing materials. This would include things like your websites, business cards, letterhead, and other similar materials. So those of you who I speak with more often are very familiar with the SFI Office of Label Use and Licensing and this exact picture in front of you. We are there for your questions, concerns, and anything else related to label use, licensing, and certification. One of our other main objectives, however, is to really help you with your documentation. So this is the page where you log in to submit your label use requests. So the label approval process is a kind of a short collection of information to ensure that the label you use aligns with all of the logo use rules that SFI has in the 2015-2019 standard. And it also keeps a historical record of approval should you need additional documentation. And this is often very helpful when it's time for your audit. So there's a couple of steps, and there's a little bit more detail on here. It's not as complicated as it looks. In short, you just upload your logo, you complete some information on what that logo is and your supplier, and that helps ensure that the label you're using applies with the forest content from your supplier. And then when you hit submit, we review all of that, make sure it adds up, and give you your documentation so you can have what you need for your audit or other documentation. So also to reiterate what Jason said at the beginning, we're always here for questions. I know that some of this is not always, there's often a lot of questions that come up in lots of different special cases. But we're, in addition to asking us, there's other resources. The SFI Section 4 Chain of Custody Standard is a great resource for listing out what you need on your documentation and invoicing and that kind of thing. And then also Section 5 of the SFI standard is for a standard, it's a fairly easy read, and it includes all kinds of easy takeaways on label use and what you can and can't do and that kind of thing. So I strongly recommend, if you don't have that on hand already, just let me know and I can send it over to you. And then last but not least, there's the SFI website. Jason's going to get into all kinds of other details on what SFI is up to these days, but we keep all kinds of information on our site, and so I do encourage you sometimes to just have a look and find what you need on there as well. So on that, I'm going to be handing it over back to Jason, who's going to be speaking on more aspects of the SFI program.
Wonderful, thanks, Rachel. And so as I mentioned up front, we do have three other pillars that make up the larger scope of who SFI is. And so I'll quickly run through these other three pillars and why it's so important that SFI is a part of these conversations. The first being conservation leadership. And within the SFI Forest Management Standard, there is a specific requirement that SFI program participants have to support forest research. And this has been a requirement since SFI was first developed back in 1995. And we have been doing a lot of annual reporting over those years. And what we found was that since 1995, SFI program participants have directly invested almost $1.6 billion in forest research. Just last year in 2017, we know that SFI program participants invested almost $59 million. And you can see the large majority of this is in forest health, as well as other key areas related to conservation-related objectives. And so this was wonderful news to us, understanding that SFI is making a difference when it comes to research within the conservation community. But what we really wanted to do was start diving into a lot of what this research represented. And so a few years ago, we then started diving further into, okay, so what are these research projects that our program participants are a part of? And what we found was that there was over 400 different conservation and research projects that our program participants were a part of, and it represented more than 550 different unique partnerships with various organizations, whether it's conservation organizations, government agencies, academia, community groups. And so this was, again, was surprising, and as well, it was something that we said, well, this is wonderful, so how can we even parlay this more and figure out what we can do to leverage this opportunity even further? And so a few years now, is back in 2010, we announced our Conservation and Community Grant Program. And really the purpose of this Conservation and Community Grant Program was designed to help support a lot of these research projects that were already occurring, but how could we better leverage those? How could we better communicate those? How could we better support those efforts? And so it was through this Conservation and Community Grant Program that we launched back in 2010 that we started to really have more of a hands-on role with many of these projects and many of these partnerships, whether it was working with the World Resources Institute to help develop illegal logging tools, or it's working with American Bird Conservancy on looking at how we can bring back forest birds and how active forest management and responsible forest management can help with that. And so we started looking at those various projects since 2010. We've awarded over 58 different conservation grants across the U.S. and Canada. And you can go to our website, and there's a great section within our website, probably the best section within our website, that really outlines a lot of these great partnerships and what these projects are about and why we're a part of these various conservation grant projects. So then it was about 3 years ago that we said, well, this is great that we have this conservation grant program, but how can we really make a true impact? SFI now has well over 300 million acres of certified land across the U.S. and Canada, which is an impressive footprint of certified acreage, but what's that true impact that we're having? And so it was a few years ago that we then launched this Conservation Impact Project. We know that brand owners want to understand the impact of their sourcing. We also know that program participants want to justify the cost of certification. We know that conservation stakeholders want to better understand the value that these certification programs like SFI is having on the ground. And so because of this, we felt it was important to really dive deep into this research on 3 core topics that were identified when it came to water, carbon, and biodiversity or wildlife. And so how can SFI, through those conservation grant program, through the research requirements, through those partnerships that we're establishing, how can we better tell the story of the true impact SFI is having on water, carbon, and biodiversity, and how can we communicate that so that we can feel good and have the reward side of why using forest products is a positive thing because of these 3 core topics, instead of the negative side that we often hear about deforestation and illegal logging, which rightfully so is of concern in many parts of the world. But because SFI operates in this low-risk area of the U.S. and Canada, how can we switch that and start telling the reward side of why using forest products can help with these core topics? The third pillar that SFI felt was critical to the success of our larger mission is community engagement. And if you aren't familiar with the SFI implementation committees, these are really the core grassroots networks that operate in 34 different provinces and states and regions across the U.S. and Canada. These unique networks, they're made up of 1,000 different people, and it's a wide variety and diverse stakeholder group that includes landowners and loggers and professionals and indigenous people, government agencies, academia, scientists, as well as conservation groups. And it's these implementation committees that really provide that local expertise on how not only SFI is implemented in that various region, but also various community projects, whether it's making that connection between building affordable housing through Habitat for Humanity and using a product that is certified to the SFI program, or it's working with Boy Scouts and local chapters and Girl Scouts and local chapters and making those connections between the importance of recreation and environmental education. And so it is these local networks that make up those grassroots within SFI. If you are interested to learn more about the SFI implementation committees, you can go on our website, and there's a section within our website that lists each of those states or provinces where SICs exist. We're also dedicated to ensuring and supporting underserved communities. And I mentioned Habitat for Humanity a few times, but this also includes urban groups like the Greening of Detroit, as well as support for the Black Family Land Trust, which is an incredible organization that's looking at land retention within the southeast U.S. And so this is also a core area of focus for SFI in what we do to ensure future forests. Something that happened earlier this year was through our Project Learning Tree Canada network, which is a program of SFI, is that we are now helping to support the Canadian government in helping place 1,600 jobs through their Green Spaces program. And so Canada understands the importance of the forest sector within the Canadian government. They understand also that green jobs have been declining, and so through our network and through our support, we are helping to place 1,600 jobs through our network. And again, we believe this to be an important effort within the scope of SFI. The fourth pillar of work is education, and specifically looking at environmental education. Last year, SFI became the new home to Project Learning Tree, and Project Learning Tree is about a 40-year-old organization that really provides educators the tools and the resources to help teach environmental education as part of their core curriculum. PLT really does envision a future where the next generation values that nature and provides that knowledge and skills to make informed decisions and take responsible actions to sustain them. These teaching tools are available in kindergarten through grade 12, and we really truly believe that this program is making an important difference in how we're teaching those next generation of leaders within environmental education. And so, excuse me, there's a wide variety of different aspects and a wide scope to what SFI represents these days. It's not just the SFI chain of custody standard and a label to go with it, but we truly are a part of these conservation research projects, elevating communities throughout the SFI network, as well as enriching students through Project Learning Tree and environmental education. And so with that, we understand that there's many things that can help differentiate SFI in the marketplace, and this aspect of SFI is one of those key aspects that can truly add more value and to the products that you're producing. And so with that, we have started to work with various organizations in adding more claims to the product. So it's not just a an SFI label with the claim, but maybe there's a conservation-related claim or a community-related claim that's a part of that as well. And so we're happy to work with you to add more value to your participation within SFI through all these various aspects of the SFI program, not just standards, but conservation, community, as well as education. And with that, I want to throw this slide back up because this is the team here at SFI that helps support the program when it comes to our certificate holders that are using the SFI on-product label, as well as those chain of custody certificate holders, whether it's Gregor, Rachel Daroff, Rachel Hamilton, or myself. We're happy to answer any of your questions. And with that, I thank you, and I'm ready to open it up for questions. And so if you have any questions, just go ahead and submit them in the box, and we'll get to them one by one.